Okay, so welcome. This is one of the second sessions on the MSIX requirements and also data requests and move notices. And so I have some of my favorite colleagues with me who help me keep all my data stuff organized, and they are on our TST. We have a technical support team, a work group meeting group that specifically works with data. And so I'm going to be joined by some of my colleagues here in just a second. So I'm going to do the first portion and then turn it over to them. And so, and I'll try to pay attention to the chat box too, to see if you want to go ahead and put your name and where you're from. We'll try to pay attention to that as it comes in. So in the last session, we were kind of talking about a few of the new regulations that might be coming down for the MDEs. And so we all are required to be able to make sure that we're doing specific things in MSIX. And it says here, collect and submit MSIX minimum data elements for every migratory child who's eligible to receive MEP services in the state on the effective date of these regulations. And so I'm going to share a few of the timeline information that's on there, just so that you have that. And so it says here, in the last session, we talked a little bit about when things are due. So migratory children with newly approved COEs, you get that COE in the system. What's the due date of when I'm supposed to get all those MDEs? It says collect and submit to MSIX all MDEs applicable to child's age and grade level for every migratory children for whom the SEA approves a new COE. We're supposed to be gathering those MDEs within 10 days of approving a new COE for the child. So some states right now, all they're doing is putting the COE in, and that's all they're doing. Remember, that's not all that we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be doing a lot more than that. To be able to make sure that you can kind of see, within 10 working days when that COE goes in, that you're getting those MDEs. So if you have any questions as we go through that, feel free to put that in the chat box. I'll try to pay attention. So secondary age students with newly approved COEs. Secondary age students and secondary state school records, you have to collect and submit all applicable MDEs from the most recent secondary school in the state previously attended by the migratory child, supposed to be within 10 working days of approving a new COE for the migratory child. So just make sure that that's something that's, that you have on your radar and that you're working on. So secondary age students. So sometimes there's differences between our elementary school kids and our secondary students on what we're gathering. So if a secondary age student, if out of state secondary school records, it says notify MSIX if one of the local operating agencies obtains record from a secondary school attended previously in another state by the migratory child. So once you get a new kid, they come in and you get the records from the other state, you want to be able to get those into MSIX as soon as possible within 30 calendar days. So that's where that comes in. End of term. So at the end of the school year, collect and submit all MDE updates and newly available MDEs for migratory children who are eligible during the term and for whom the SEA previously submitted the data. So you can't just put it in one time and be like, all right, we've got this kid, we got the COE, we got the current information, and then you're done. You're going to keep updating that, like I said, at the end of the term. So at the end of the school year, within 30 calendar days at the end of fall, spring, summer intercession terms. So make sure that that's on your radar. End of term for all eligibility expires before the end of school. So collect and submit to MSIX all minimum data element updates and newly available MDEs for the migratory child through the end of school year within 30 calendar days of the end of that term. So again, these are hard timelines that we're supposed to be meeting. You want to make sure that you're meeting. Change of residence submission, collect and submit. So to MSIX, all new MDEs and MDE updates that have become available to the SEA or one of its local operating agencies since the last submission. So within 4 working days of receiving a data request for a migratory child who has changed residence within the state or from another SEA, then you have to be able to, if you get that request, you've got to be able to get that in. So you want to make sure that that's also something that you have on your minds. And then let's say you get in there and you see the information is not correct. Something's in there, or someone tells you your information is not correct, or you see you have to send a written or electronic acknowledgement to the requester, investigate the request. So somebody tells you, hey, Jessica, your information is not correct. This is what I'm going to do. Send that acknowledgement that I received it, investigate the request, decide whether to revise the data as requested, send the requester a written or electronic notice of the SEA's decision, and that needs to happen within 30 calendar days of receipt of request. So you just make sure you have that, and you will have the slides. You can always go back and look at that. If there is a request to correct information in MSIX submitted by another SEA, and so it says send the parent or guardian child's request to the relevant SEA if it's done by parents, and it's due within 4 working days of that request for a parent, guardian, or child. So sometimes the parent can say, hey, the information is not correct. We've got to do that within 4 days. So we're going to start this presentation by just kind of reviewing these, and then we're going to turn over to really look at the process of when people get a data request or an MSIX notification, kind of how they handle that. So when you see a revision is needed in the data in MSIX, you submit the revised data to MSIX within 4 days of the decision, really looking to say, hey, this is not correct. So it says, what happens if the SEA or LOA receives a request for information from another state or from the department? You have to send that. Someone else requests information. You've got to send that within 10 working days. So all of this, we really need to be moving. We need to be gathering as quick as possible, and we need to be moving to meet these target dates. So when someone makes a data request, we want to make sure that we move on it as fast as possible. And remember, it says this is student data, and the sooner the records can be transferred, the better for our students. And so I'm going to turn the time over to Gloria and have her share. I'm going to go ahead and see if you can not see me, but put her, remove the spotlight here, and have Gloria. I'm going to turn the time over to her to talk about. It's one thing to talk about, you know, this is what we're supposed to do. It's another thing when you can really look, okay, locally, this is what we do, and this is how we do it. So she's going to kind of walk us through what happens when they get a data request, what that looks like, and I will be quiet and turn that time over to her. I think you're muted, Gloria.
Sorry about that. My name is Gloria Altamirano. I'm the data director with the Ohio Migrant Education Center. I've been with the center since January 2001, so it's been a long time. And so I guess I'm at the SEA level for the data, and we have 5 regional programs that are our other data staff. So I have to train them. They're the ones that do a lot of these data requests. Do I have control over this, or will you be changing the slides?
Let me change them for you.
Okay. Now, with any MSIX training, we always have to go over the legal references, which is the statute, the Code of Federal Regulations, and the guidance. This is what we use to kind of guide what it is that we have to do and when we need to do it, how long we need to keep our information, and the timeline, what Jessica went over previously to this. Next. And she had said, you know, once the SEA or LOA receives a request for the information, MSIX gives you 4 working days to reply to that. So when we get that, we see 4 days, but then the next day it'll say 3 days, 2 days, 1 day. It keeps track of that. And then once it's past that time, it'll tell you it's past that time. So one thing that we want to make sure that we're doing is logging into MSIX consistently. If we can do it on a daily basis, then we do it on a daily basis. If you cannot, you want to make sure that you're at least getting in once a week, because you never know when you're going to be getting the data requests or you're getting move notices. Because of those timeframes we have, we want to make sure we're logging in and we're taking action as soon as possible with those data requests or move notifications. Next.
Just a quick sound check. Can everybody hear good? Gloria, we might need you to yell.
Might need me to yell. Maybe I'll put my computer closer.
There we go. There we go.
Okay.
It sounds a little muffled.
Okay. There she goes.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Better? All right. You can go to the next slide. Okay. So
yes, I can hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I want to make sure that you can hear me because this is being recorded. And if you can't hear me, then the recording doesn't really serve its purpose.
Oh, okay. No, I can hear you perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. So once we get a request, we go to the student search screen. In order to search for a student, you have to put at least 2 initials in the first and last name. Or if you don't, if you have their MSIX ID number, it's quicker to get to that student with the MSIX ID number. If you don't have any of that information and say it's a brand new student coming into your state, you can also go to the advanced search. Next slide. And on the advanced search, you can search the student by the parents' names or by the birth information. That's not really requested anymore. So unless you're still sending it, which we're still sending it, that information may not be in there for the birthplace. But you can search by parents' first name and last name, and you can search by the second last name in this part. If you try and put in the second last name in the previous screen, it will not let you, it won't find the student, because you can only put 1 last name in that first screen. So if you want to put in 2 last names, then you have to go to this advanced search. And you could always go back to the basic search if you go ahead and click on basic search. Next screen. And then the student will come up, and of course the student information is blanked out, so we aren't putting any of that information out. Any information that is in here is data from it's not real data, just so that you know that. And on here you can see their graduation information. So depending on what information or MDEs you have to collect and submit to MSIX, this is where you can also get that information from another school. And this is why you need to make sure that if it's not in here, that's when you would request a record from the other state or the other school district. You know, on here you have the information of the parents, the birthplace, their last QAD. So this also tells you when their QAD expired, which usually it's from another state. But if you've done a COE, this is where you can see and check that data to make sure that it's correct, the move to, move from, and then the expiration and arrival dates. And this is also where you can add them to your list if you make a list with students. Next page. And then this is what the consolidated student record looks like. You have different lines where you can open it up. Like this one, I opened up the enrollments line. So that shows you the different enrollments that this student has had and the different school districts where they've enrolled in. You can open this up even more and get a phone number and address and more information on that enrollment line. And as you can see for this one, it's an old screenshot, but it doesn't have a withdrawal date. So for this student, you probably wouldn't get it until they moved out. But if they did that records request, then they would know what withdrawal date to put on there because it would have been when that student arrived to our state. And then this is the Ross. Hi, you're going a little fast for me. The raw student record view. I like this view because this is where you can see the data specialist from the other state that when you do a records request, it shows you who it's going to. So if you click on raw view, it takes you to the next screen and it'll show you the different states where the student has been identified. So this one has been in Ohio, Florida, and Michigan. So I'm going to use Florida as an example. If you click on that down arrow, it will open it up. And the next screen will show you that you can look at additional state or migrant IDs. You can look at qualifying moves. So for a recruiter, they could click on this and see the previous qualifying move, and this would show the migratory history. But because we're doing data, we would click on enrollments. So the next screen will show you what that looks like. Once you click on that, it'll show you all the enrollments, just like on that first page. If we click on here and open it up, it's going to show us more data though. Next. So when you open that up, it's going to show you all the information from that school district, the actual residency date, residency verification date, the district of residence. It'll show whether they got the Algebra 1 or equivalent indicator, their graduation date, when they're thinking about graduating, and where they're thinking of graduating from. It also has the out-of-state transcript indicator. No, this is where you would put down whether, or it would show whether you had received out-of-state transcripts or not. Also, it would mark where if the student is homeschooled. And then it has all the phone numbers and everything for the actual school building and the school district. And if you see down at the bottom, it says data administrators. When you click on that arrow down, next, it will show you those data people. And this one, for example, was Florida. So for this county or for this student, it would be going to these two people, Lori and Louisa. Now, normally you do a request and you get the data back, but sometimes if it's a big state, it takes them a while to get it back to you right away. So if you're not getting anything back, what you can do is always call them or email them. This will give you that information in case it does take longer than the 4 days. Next. And so if you have a student, you want to do a data request, you look them up, they come up, and then you click where it says data request, and this little pop-up will appear when you click on data request, and this is where you have to fill in the information on the what data you want from the student. Now remember, since you already have this student up, it's already going to be associated with that student, so you don't have to be writing in the student's ID number or anything like that in there, because it's already associated with that student. Next. And then in here, you put in your comments. You can put in, you know, I'm requesting this information. Say you want either previous school records, or you want to know, here's where you would ask, do you have an IEP for this student? Can I, you know, send me all their educational records? Is this student enrolled in my school district on whatever date? And that way they know when they enrolled in your school, they know what data you need. And then once you scroll down, you'll put in the state, the district, and then the actual school building for the students. Now, the only thing that we do different is if it's for preschool students, we don't put anything in here. We don't do data requests, but students from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, we request records for them. All of our 5 MEPs have to do that on every single student. The only students that they don't request records from are usually the OSY if they're coming in from another country, like our H2A, for example. They're not coming in from a school district where we can request records from. So those we usually don't do data requests on. Next window. And there's an example. Students enrolled on 6/13/23 and would like to request all school records transcript. Fax to me, it doesn't necessarily have to be fax, but you want to put in your contact information, your phone number, and when you can be reached. That way, if they have any questions about what you're asking for, they can call you and ask you for that. Now, I didn't put email in here because once they get this, it will have your email. So they'll already have that information. Next. And if a student has left, and you're requesting record, or you're not really requesting records, but you're giving them the data on the student that arrived, is leaving from here, then you would say the student withdrew on 8/15/23 from our school district. The student received a half a credit in Algebra 1 and a half a credit in Advanced Physical Science. If additional information is needed, please send me a records request. So I'm letting the other state know that the student is leaving us and going to them, and what credits they earned in my state. That way I know that they will be, they will get that credit over in the home base states. Because all this information that you put in your data requests or your move notifications, it gets saved in there with that data requests, and that information is going to be there for anybody to look at. OME can see that. So make sure that you don't put any PII information, no student birth date, no student names, anything like that you don't want to have in here. Next. And this is where, like I said, you have to pick a state, and from the state, then you have a choice of the different school districts within that state. You pick that district, and then once you pick the district, it gives you a list of names of the school buildings that are within that district, and you choose which one it is that that student is from. Usually the last enrollment line is what you can use to see what was their last enrollment, and that would be more or less where you're going to be sending that information to that you want back from that school. And then you click submit and your data request has been sent. Next. And then just some best practices. Once you receive a data request and it's on your work list, it automatically starts counting down the time you have to respond to the request. So you want to at least send a response back saying, I've received your data request. I still need to contact another school district, or what you need to do so that they know that you're working on it. Okay. Once you've been able to get the data, or you forwarded this to a school district and they're the ones who get the data, make sure that you're following up with them to make sure that it was sent and that whoever was requesting it received it. And then that's when you can go ahead and dismiss that work list. But you got to make sure that you're getting that information to them within 4 days. I know that sometimes it may take a little bit longer, but you want to make sure you let them know that at least you're working on it. Because if they don't get anything, then they don't even know whether you're working on it, if you got it, or what's going on. So that's when you would go to the raw student record view, get the phone number and that email, and you can call them or email them. And then users can request and confirm that the state where the student came from has submitted updated information to MSIX. So if you know that there is some information that's not correct, you can do the request and say, you know, this data is incorrect. Can you please update it? Or say your withdrawal date's not in there. Can you update the record and put in a withdrawal date so we know that, you know, they withdrew on this date from your school district. So through the frequent exchange of data requests, users can build that network of peers where migratory children are traveling. So it's really nice that once you're doing this back and forth and you kind of know who you're talking to, and then once you go to the national conference, then you can actually meet up with them and say, hey, you know, let's meet up for lunch or after the sessions. And that way you get to build that network and actually meet the people that you're working with. Because you both have the same goals in mind. Timely response to data requests are critical to a student's success. So, for example, our programs in the summer are only 6 weeks long. I know that there are states, some of them are only 2 weeks long. So for us to actually give the student the actual educational services that they need, we need to have that data ASAP. So the sooner you can get to doing that data request and giving that other state the information, the sooner that they can make sure the student is in the right courses or they're in the correct grade, anything like that. We need to have that, because if we don't know what classes they've already taken, then we might be putting them in a wrong class, making them do the same information all over again. We don't want to do that. We want them to be successful, and we want them to do and get done what they need to do within a certain time frame. The students want to graduate. We want to make sure we get them there. So if we can get them enrolled into a class and help them to get that done and maybe even start on another one, then we want to do that. And then also to protect the student's privacy, make sure that you're not including any sensitive information such as social security number, personally identifiable information in the comments fields in any data requests. The comments entered will be shared unedited and in their entirety with other MSIX users. So anybody can look up that work list item and see the conversation that's been going back and forth. So that's why you want to make sure that none of that information is in there. Next. Questions, anybody? I'm done with my part.
So you have any particular questions that you want to ask about? I noticed there was a question earlier about resolving a move notice. So we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to kind of change topics that will actually address that. I think, yeah, so we're going to switch it over to Colette from Iowa is going to talk a little bit, but at the same time, put your questions in if you think about anything that Gloria just shared that you want to maybe have explain a little bit more. And I think you did a really good job showing all the screens and really walking them through it. But feel free to add any questions you guys have. So I'm going to see if Colette, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm going to spotlight you there.
Okay.
Okay, and I will make myself stop my video. Okay, go ahead, and then I'll just change slides however you want.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to just quickly overview how we're set up in Iowa, just so this kind of sets the frame for how we handle move notices. We do statewide recruitment across 8 regions. So we have 7 regional recruiters and 1 local school district recruiter, and we have 13 district projects. So 13 districts that receive migrant funding each year. We also have an IDNR coordinator, an OSY coordinator, and then a data specialist, and that's my role. So when we receive move notices in our state, they come into my work list as the data specialist. And I kind of have a review process I go through and decide what to do with it. And just a quick reminder, the purpose of the move notices is to remove educational barriers for migrant students as they're moving specifically from state to state. And that's really how MSIX helps with that. So we want to communicate with the new district as soon as possible, just to help the family potentially be determined as eligible and receive services and support as soon as they can in the new state. So like I said, a move notice would come into my work list within MSIX. And the first step that I would take is I send a quick note back to the sending state just to let them know that we received the move notice, thanking them for the information if they've provided, and just letting them know we're following up on it. And then you want to go to the next slide forward. There you go. Thanks. So then the first thing I do is I check to see if we have an existing COE in Iowa. And I look at the information that was provided in the MSIX notification, just if there was a general area or city where they were headed. And if that matches or is close to the information that we have on a current COE in Iowa, then I would go ahead and dismiss the move notice in MSIX, just with a comment that we have a COE completed in Iowa. If we don't have a COE completed in Iowa, the first step that I would take is I check for a school enrollment through our state data portal. In Iowa, we're fortunate to have access to a database that is information is entered by each local school district when they enroll a new student. And so we can check by student name or birth date to see what enrollments we have for that child in Iowa. And so that can help us determine the region or area of the state where a student is if they're in Iowa already. So if the student does show an enrollment, I note that information. Another thing that I do is I check our district referral sheet to see if the child is on the list. So we in Iowa use what we call the parent survey, and it's just a couple questions. I think Jessica referred to it as the family survey earlier this morning, and it's just a couple questions that we ask all of our school districts to include in the registration information when a family first comes to the district. And they're just flag questions that would help us know if we should have a recruiter follow up with the family to determine eligibility. So asking them if they work, if they're coming to do agriculture work, or if they've done agricultural work in the last 36 months. So if the answers to those questions are yes, when the family fills out that survey, that information is sent to our IDNR coordinator, Alex, and then he can determine which recruiter should be following up with the family. And so then that information is added to what we call our district referral sheet. So if the move notification student is already on a district referral sheet, then I wouldn't do anything further with that child's information. If they're not on a district referral sheet, I would add the parent and student information to what we call our move notice list. And it's a shared document that we have with all the recruiters in our state. And I would include as much information as I can, where the student was coming from, the student's name, date of birth, parent name, if we know the district name of where they're enrolling or where they're headed to in Iowa. And then there's also room on that sheet for the recruiter to add any information when they start to try to make contact with the family. And then there's also a place on there where I can assign a regional recruiter based on where they're at in the state. This move notice list is fed into a district dashboard. I'm sorry, a data dashboard that our IDNR coordinator has set up. And it's it pulls together all of our referral sheets. So it pulls in the district referral sheets from our funded districts and from our non-funded districts and our move notice list. And it provides our recruiters kind of a snapshot of what their workload looks like. They can go to the dashboard and click on any one of those referral links, and it will bring them back to the bigger spreadsheet that has more information for them of where they need to go and the family's information for them to follow up on. So the move notice list, I update that weekly based on COEs that are approved. So if there's a family listed on there that a recruiter is following up with and a COE is approved, I would know that when I go through our approved COE list. And so then I go back to the move notice list and I would remove that family from that list. And then at that point, based on the determination after our recruiter has met with the family, I would go back into MSIX and I could dismiss the move notice. And I include a note of whether they were approved or not approved. You want to go to the next slide. That's kind of wraps up our process. Yeah, that wraps up our process in Iowa. And so I think Linda, is going to be talking about her process next.
Well, we've got a question that says,
Okay.
I get move notice that the student is moving to New Jersey, no city, no phone number. How often does that happen? So when you get that, Colette, are you just responding right back like, hey, I need some information to contact them, or what is your process on that?
Sure. If we get a notice that doesn't have anything, I would email back and ask if they have a phone number or email address or any other information they can provide. Because it is kind of looking for a needle in a haystack. In Iowa, like I said, we do have access to a state data portal. So sometimes when kids are coming to Iowa and the sending state doesn't know where they're going, we're able to locate them because they enroll in a district and then we can find them that way. But yeah, I think responding to the sending state, just asking for any information is a great starting point.
Here's your good map on how you guys are all organized.
Yep.
So if you guys have anyone that comes from Iowa, Colette would be who you're talking to. She covers the data for the whole state. So I'm going to turn the time over now to Linda. Make sure I look at that.
Perfect.
I didn't even know you had that.
Um,
There you go. Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. I'm Linda Fournier. I am the Migrant Education Services Data System Specialist for Minnesota. And I pretty much work in the process of the data requests, the move notices, the state administrator for our state. And so I'm just going to go over our process and how how we actually address the move notices in our state. So you can advance to the next slide, please. So when we receive a move notice, the purpose is to determine eligibility and have the most current COE in the database. And we use MIS 2000, and that's for the family and to help remove educational barriers for our students. And it's also important to collaborate with the initiating states on behalf of our migratory students, since we are sharing migratory students, and the majority of our students are coming from Texas. So the communication with initiating states, we have put in process the responsibility of corresponding with the sender of the move notice within 3 days of receiving the move notice. And this is just a courtesy, like, we got the information because we know what it's like to have existing move notices out there, and we're like, oh, did they get it? Did they not? Or like, just making sure that we're keeping that communication going. If we do not have contact information for the family, we correspond with that sending state for our family's contact information. And even if we have contact information for the family, again, we will correspond within the 3 days of receiving that move notice for that courtesy and just that communication and establishing network. And it's good, and it's just a good practice to send that for us. So we have that in our process. And so we check MIS 2000 for if we have a recent COE in Minnesota. So we check that first, and if a COE has been submitted in Minnesota, we dismiss the move notice in MSIX. If a COE has not been submitted in Minnesota, we do submit a recruitment request for one of our recruiters to basically reach out to the family. It's recruitment efforts, and they must be made within 48 hours to connect, at least connecting with the family from that recruitment request. And once a recruitment request is submitted, we get notifications. So dismissing the move notices in M6.
Am I on the right slide?
I think you're one ahead.
Okay, I'm like, it keeps moving. It does these fancy things. I'm like, what did I do?
I'm like, maybe she wants me to speed up.
No. It's like, shoot, I didn't touch anything, and it's just like, okay, am I on the right one?
Yep, you're on the right
Okay,
one.
I'm not gonna touch anything. I don't know what I did. Go ahead.
So dismissing move notices. If all attempts have been made to contact the family but no success, the state administrator, will dismiss the notice and add a comment stating that there were several attempts made by the recruiter. If a recruitment request has been submitted, I will also check the recruitment request and the database just to make sure that that COE has been secure in our state. The move notice will stay in the work list. I just keep it in there because then I always go back to it. I mean, I'm checking this, if not daily, at least 3 to 4 times a week. So I will go and check, or it will stay in there, and I'll just kind of follow up on that with the recruitment request and make sure that the recruiters have exhausted all efforts in contacting the family. When dismissing a move notice, we do also add a comment stating the outcome. Again, just a courtesy thing, that way they know what was determined or what the results were. And you can go to the next one, Jessica. Thank you. So when we receive a notice that your student has recently moved to the purpose of that is to ensure that we've collected all minimum data elements, transcripts for the students, and have a withdrawal date in the database for each student. We have the responsibility of corresponding again with the sender of the notice within 3 days of receiving the notice, just again, the courtesy thing. You can go to the next. Oh, you're already there. Thank you.
Your slides have a mind of their own.
I can tell. So dismissing those, I will check the database, and then we also have what we call is the migrant student information form. This is how we collect our minimum data elements with the school districts. So we're I think we have about 99 schools with at least one migratory student. And so we are constantly in contact with our districts on collecting these minimum data elements for our students. So we check, we also can go in MSIX if a district did not submit any data in one of our MSIFs, our workbooks, then we will check MSIX and just check the history of moves and then try to make contact with some of those districts that they have had in the history of moves. If they might have had an enrollment somewhere else. And so we'll just kind of go back and check enrollments for those districts. We also verify that we've exhausted all efforts to obtain the minimum data elements for those students. And then depending on the outcome, we'll dismiss the move notices with a comment, of course. And so to answer that question too, I wanted to add to the question that was asked about if there was no city, there was nothing on there, you just get that move notice. That's a good place to go to is MSIX and check the enrollments to see if they have had a history of moving to your state and what school districts maybe they were enrolled in. I think that's key, just checking those enrollments and checking to see if those students have been there. And I think that's it, Jessica. If there are any questions.
We've got several here, and thank you for your patience with me and I should be fired for my changing slides there.
You're fine.
Maybe we'll go through them and then Colette, Gloria, Linda, any of you can answer these too. So Frances says she has a family moving to Iowa, so she would like Colette's information. So I'm going to throw that in the chat box. And then Virginia asks, how long does a move notice stay active? Over 100 days. Anyone want to answer that one? No, I've seen it in there, for states, 300 days where it's still.
I think there's, I don't think there's a limit. Go ahead.
Because I had some work list items that I think it was either a merge or a split that I had put in. And it was on my list for over 300 and some days. It was on there for more than a year. And it took them that long to find out what the issue was within MSIX to get it fixed. Once they did, then they took it off my work list item and it was no longer there. But it sat there for a long time before we were able to get it out. And I wasn't the one who dismissed it. It was MSIX who fixed it. So if anything like that happens where you try and do a split or a merge and it's not working, contact the help desk and they'll put in a ticket. And then whenever they're able to resolve that, they'll go ahead and resolve it, or they'll tell you, go ahead and try and do it again. And then you go ahead and finish what it was that you were trying to do.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it stays there until you close it out, as far as, because I was working with the state recently that they had some that was 350 days still. And it was these guys, they're not going to go away unless somebody's closing them out. And if you're taking care of it. Maria says, what do you recommend when a request has been sent asking for, make sure you're muted. Somebody's not muted. Okay, I think I found it. Says, what do you recommend when a request has been sent asking for contact information, but the sending state never replies? I would call a contact, you can even go to the results one and reach out to the state director and say, hey, who am I supposed to reach out to? Start at the top if nobody, because they would know exactly who you're supposed to reach out to. So that's what I would do. Anybody else do anything different?
Well, and to Jessica, with the data request, I think since you have 4 days to answer, I mean, you could even just keep corresponding in there. But yeah, I think what you said is just keep trying.
Yeah. Reach out to, make sure I'm muting anybody that does not.
To the raw student record view, like I had showed previously, you can check on who the data admins are for that student, and then you'll have a phone number and email. And I've done it before where I've called everybody on that list until somebody answered me. And then that's how I got through and talked to someone. It doesn't happen a lot, but when I've had to do it, I have done it. I think it was once that I had to call 5 different people until finally one of them answered the phone and then I talked to someone. But yeah, the OME is tracking that. So they are seeing which ones are getting resolved and how long it's taking.
Yeah. Well, there was a question that says, I'm a new data clerk. I'm new to the position. I do not have access to MSIX. The only system I have that I work inputting COE information is Skyward. So I don't think Florida is an MIS 2000 state. Correct me if I'm wrong, any other Floridians on the listening in. So you're going to have to reach out to whoever your supervisor is, or reach out to someone else from the MEP, the state, to just see what you're supposed to be doing, because every state does it a little bit different. And so not knowing exactly how they're doing it in your area, there's the COE information should be inputted. It's going to MSIX. And so you'd have to figure out who gives out those MSIX accounts in your state. And so everyone would kind of need to know that for their own state. It says, I cannot see comments on move notifications once dismissed. For example, a state will add a comment regarding the family and immediately dismiss it. I log into MSIX to be able to look at it, but it's not available not any longer. Is it not available to read those comments? Is there a different place that I'm not aware of that I can see those comments?
Yeah, you could actually go back to your work list item, and you can that's what's nice about MSIX is you have the history of those work list items, and you can plug in that item, or the work list ID, and actually look at the history of any work list ID that you've had in your work list.
So the suggestion would be to pay attention to that ID and then go back and look at the. Okay.
There's also like a date range though too that you have, like when it was created and when it was resolved. So you could put in a date range and those work lists will come up.
Okay. Christina Castaneda, nice last name there. I have two that are for over 250 days. Who should I contact in regards to this? The state. So it depends too, if you have the opportunity to actually close them out, like once you've done the work for it, or if somebody else has that. So you'd have to know, like, who's your supervisor. I would ask them, who has the ability. I'm not sure, Christina, if you have the ability to close that out once it's been taken care of.
Jessica, can I add to that really quick?
Yeah.
Because I had a similar situation, and we had, I don't even know how many work list IDs we had, just move notices that we had sitting in our work list. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just, I don't like looking at it when it has that long of a list, because then I feel like I'm not cleaning them up. Well, it turns out that because like Texas is unique, they have only, they don't, like the state doesn't have primary users. It's just a couple of people that have that administrative use or role in their state. So for us, when what happened is the move notice was initiated by Texas. So what happened though is that the turnover, they were no longer employed at the district. So then we had to go. I was like, there's got to be somebody we can contact, and that's who. So I contacted Nez. He's the person that from Texas that is the primary has that primary role in Texas, and so I contacted him. He was able to go in then and start dismissing or resolving some of those work lists. And it went from like, gosh, I don't know. I think we had over 100 in there to like 20. So, so yeah, anyhow, I just wanted to add that.
No, I think that's good advice. So reach out if you're working with another state, reach out to them and see. So you just want to make sure you're doing everything possible, like Linda just said, cleaning up anything that you have control over, reaching out, getting that information, sharing the information that you need to. But then sometimes there's going to be these snafus where you're going to have to reach out to the help desk, or you're going to have to reach out to the other state to really make sure that you're able to clean that up. I wanted to share, I know we're running short on time, and I want to, probably many of you, it's close to your lunchtime, so I'm going to make sure we're honoring your time. We do have a document that we created that's under the What's New section. I believe we have it in here. We have a whole process document, and this was created, and Linda, Colette, and Gloria have all kind of helped with this. I'm going to drop this in the chat box because sometimes, you want a reference to say, okay, what am I supposed to do? And so the data group really worked on this. Let me make sure I'm sharing it so you can actually see it. Yep. Kind of what would be good protocols? Like you get this move notice, what's step 1, what's step 2, what's step 3. And so they just made this process document just as a reference. And so we just want to make sure that you know that that's there. And so there are a lot of resources available in MSIX. It's one of those resources that if you are working with data in any way or recruiting, it's really good to have access to MSIX. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about, in the beginning session, several of you are wondering why you're not able to see some of these reports. And so it depends on the type of account that you have, you know, what you're able to actually receive and what you get. But we just wanted to kind of walk through kind of move notices and data requests, some general things so you could kind of be aware. And then also you can see we've had 3 different states present, you know, how they do things, and they do things very similarly, but yet each state will have maybe a different setup or, you know, a different system they're using. So we just want to make sure that your slides, I didn't even touch anything. They're moving. Listen, we wanted to make sure that you could see it from different states and how they're doing that. So here's that move process document that you can access. And just a reminder, we also have a tool that talks about the residency verification process. I know that's not on the topic of what we're talking about today, but will walk you through exactly what that looks like. This is the data. This one really looks at things that you need to be thinking about as far as reconciliation. If you're just not sure even what all is required for MEP data, this was a tool that they created. And then we have the data manual that you can use. So that is available for everybody. Let me see if you have any more comments. Okay, so that's pretty much what we had for you guys today. We'll go ahead and I'm gonna stop recording real quick.